Hey everyone, I'm Richard Byrne. You probably know me from Practical Ed Tech and FreeTechForTeachers.com. And I just want to pass along a little tip about learning from professional development webinars or other online courses. I'm actually about to join a webinar myself in about an hour and a half from now. It's one being run by Rob Hatch. You can check it out. It's all about planning for business development if you're really interested in it. But anyway, and I love Rob's stuff. But one of the things that I always do when I'm in one of Rob's webinars or one of Chris Brogan's webinars or anyone else's webinars really, is I do a couple of things to maximize the experience for me. And it took me a few years really to figure this out. I had to shut off everything else. I had to shut off my phone. I had to shut off my extra tabs and just focus on the webinar. And the other thing that I do is I bring a notebook with me, and not a digital notebook, a physical notebook. I have a physical notebook that I sit down with, and I write out my notes while the webinar is going on, as opposed to trying to write them in another web browser. Trying to write them in Google Docs. I tried Google Docs. I've tried Google Keep. I've tried writing them everywhere. The problem is I get distracted. I distract myself so easily. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to write this quick little note here, and then I'm going to check Facebook, and before I know it, the webinar host has said a bunch of things that I've missed. So I use a physical notebook. The other little thing that I do is I think about the questions I want to follow up with during the webinar. It's really tempting for me, and this is just my own style of learning. I did this when I was 7 years old. I did it when I was 17, and I did it as a 37-year-old, and now as a almost 40-year-old. I have this habit of jumping in and asking questions before I actually think about them all the way through. So I use my notebook to write out the question and actually think about it, and then maybe I'll get it into the webinar. Sometimes I don't, and I just follow up with the webinar host. As someone who's hosted hundreds of webinars, I can tell you I like it when people follow up with questions after the webinar. For me, that's validation that they're paying attention, and two, it gives us an opportunity to go back and forth and really talk about the ideas in a way that doesn't always happen during a live webinar. During a live webinar, you can ask a quick question, but the webinar host has an outline that he or she is trying to get through. So you may not get the full response that you could get if you did a follow-up question after the webinar is over. So that's one of the things that I do, and I think that Rob and Chris have probably answered lots of questions. I know they've answered lots of questions for me after the webinar. And like I said, it's a great way to really think about the question and think about the content, because sometimes you jump in with a question and the webinar host has really already planned to address that later on. So if you can hold on for just a second, it sometimes makes the experience a little bit better for you, and obviously makes it better for the host as well. So that's my little tip. Again, if you're interested in the webinar that I'm joining tonight, it's hosted by Rob Hatch. You can find it at Owner Media. Go to owner.media. You can find it there. So thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon or evening.